Hi everyone, it's Patrick from the Good Sam EMS office. The original recording that I did with Dr. Phillips apparently got corrupted during production, so I'm going to do a quick reshoot here. Got a little extra added content at the back end of this, which will help to clarify some of the questions that have been asked of us. So let's begin. We're going to talk about adult anaphylaxis, and then I'm going to recover in detail the stroke bypass and touch on the van exam as well. So the first part of this is going to be touching on the adult anaphylaxis SMO that I talked about during the regular CE, and I made reference to the fact that the IM uh, dosing for hypotensive or shocky anaphylactic patients probably would end up back in the protocol, and that's in fact what happened. So the normal dose and route for the shocky or hypotensive anaphylaxis patient would be the 1 milligram in 10 ml concentration, 0.1 milligram slow IVIO Q3 minutes up to a max of 0.5. So that's 1 ml of your regular resuscitation concentration epi Q3 minutes up to the half a milligram total. If you don't have an IV, then you're going to do 0.3 milligrams of epi, the 1 milligram in 1 ml or 1 to 1,000 concentration. And you're going to repeat that in 3 minutes if needed. So that is the new part. I already told you probably it was coming, and it's here. So this is the stroke transport guidelines protocol. As we covered it before, it is the same with the exception of FAST exam is added to the Cincinnati Stroke Scale line in there. State requires that we have the FAST exam mentioned. If you know what the difference between them, there isn't much. FAST exam is basically the Cincinnati parameters scrambled up with different letters on them and has T for time at the end, which we know to be the last known well time. The one item that I didn't cover very well in the original CE was this 3 to 4 hour window box here on the SMO. So certain patients should get thrombolytics in certain kind of strokes and thrombotic strokes. And if you transport to a further facility and take them outside that window, then in some cases they can't get the thrombolytics. So most everybody less than 3 hours gets thrombolytics when it's appropriate. In the 3 to 4 hour window, 4 hours is the max at many places where they will give the thrombolytic. So we don't want to drive to a further place and take them out of that window in all places. So that 3 to 4 hour window just ensures that the patients who could get thrombolytics can still get them because we didn't take up time transporting them to a further location that puts them outside that window. So I'll cover that in the scenarios coming up as well. This is the two-sided, or it was made to be two-sided sheet we sent to the coordinators and the chiefs. Hopefully they've printed this out and they are available to you in abundance. On one side is the actual transport guidelines protocol, as I just showed you. And on the other side is a van kind of worksheet, cheat sheet kind of thing, which covers all of the exam parameters. The beginning of the van exam, as I explained prior, is whether the patient has an abnormal arm drift portion of the Cincinnati Stroke Scale. If they don't have arm drift, arm weakness, flaccidity, paralysis, these are new onset things in the Cincinnati Stroke Scale, then you don't ever get to the van exam. So if the patient has facial droop, but nothing else, patient does not get a van exam. Patient has slurred speech, with or without facial droop. Patient does not get a van exam unless they also have arm weakness, paralysis, or arm drift, something like that. So what if you can't get the patient to cooperate on the arm drift? If you raise their arms up and they just drop, Again, these are things to discuss with medical control. We don't really have a good palms up arm drift exam. The patient seems to be flaccid along with their facial droop and or their slurred speech or their aphasia and facial droop or whatever. If it's not clear, you call medical control from the point of first patient contact and you explain the exam, and you can work with them on what the appropriate destination in those unusual situations are. And also a reminder, if the patient has one abnormal parameter on the Cincinnati, they are Cincinnati abnormal. Just because you can't get all three parameters doesn't mean that the Cincinnati stroke scale is indeterminate or unable to um, obtain. If you have one abnormal finding, you have an abnormal exam. Same thing is true in the VAN. If you have one abnormal finding, the patient is VAN positive, that's an abnormal exam, and you make transport decisions based on the results of that exam. So this is the beginning part of the exam. This is the weakness re-examination, and you can do this as part of your Cincinnati if you notice that the patient has arm drift, or if you want to just do the palms up, hold your arms out in front of you for 10 seconds. That's a good both arm drift exam, and also is the beginning exam for the VAN. So if you've already done that palms up, hold your arms out in front of you, count to 10, you count to 10, not the patient, and there's no arm drift, then you don't need to repeat that because the patient is VAN negative. If the patient does have arm drift, minor, moderate weakness, complete flaccidity, new onset paralysis, then the patient gets a VAN, the full VAN exam. But if the patient shows no weakness, VAN negative, full stop now. So in the Cincinnati, you wouldn't even have gotten here to table 1 if the patient had no arm drift at all, and if you did the same physical exam that you would do as the beginning of the VAN exam, then the patient doesn't get the rest of the VAN exam because the patient didn't have the entry key to get there. Visual disturbance, field cut, right or left. They talk about testing all 4 quadrants. There's some research that says that there is usually a full hemispheric cut, so they don't have a left upper cut or a left lower cut. They have a left-sided cut. Go ahead and continue to retest all 4 quadrants until you hear otherwise in the protocol, because the protocol still refers to quadrant exam. And the other thing about examining is, and you'll see in the video that is linked on Moodle, the brief exam video, they do like fingers. How many fingers am I holding up? You might be better off with larger objects. I'm thinking of a relative of mine that has macular degeneration, and on a good day, he can barely see, more than a couple of feet in front of him. So he probably won't be able to do very well with fingers. But if you did like closed fist or open hand, where there's, fingers open. So is my hand closed or open? I have a fist or fingers? What are you seeing in your slightly peripheral vision? That would probably be helpful. Double vision, tracking of the eyes, all the way left, all the way right, or new onset inability to track, or new onset blindness. Those are all VAN positive for vision findings. Aphasia, expressive aphasia. They cannot speak, or they call things the wrong things. If you show them 2 objects, you show them a pen and your iPad, and they say it was a bunny rabbit and a squirrel, that is expressive aphasia. Receptive, you give them a command. If they cannot follow it, they probably have receptive aphasia. This assumes, by the way, there is not a language barrier. So if you tell them, close your eyes, okay, open them, make a fist, or stick out your tongue, or, put your hands together as if you're praying, those are all part of the receptive aphasia. They are able to follow commands. And then neglect. This is, first of all, tracking side to side. Tracking really, the exam can be everywhere. You could even go up into corners doing quadrants, etc. It's not necessary. Um, that's part of the fingers and fists thing that I was telling you before. You can also track eyes in all those directions. Um, the other part of this, so this neglect would be someone with a forced gaze. They are just looking hard left, and there's nothing that you can do, or they're able to track maybe to the center line, but not beyond that to the right. You might have gotten that in the vision exam as well when you're holding your finger up or your pen light up and you're tracking their eyes all the way to side, and you notice that they stop at the midline, then that is both an abnormal vision and a neglect positive finding. The other part of the exam here is unable or testing the ability to sense things. So if you take your fingers and you run them down the patient's forearms and you say, which arm am I touching? Or maybe you hold their wrist or touch their wrist with your palm. Which arm am I touching? And they say, you're touching them both, and they don't say both, and that's part of potentially part of neglect. So you've got the VAN exam. If there's any positive findings, you enter that center of the protocol box where you're going to be considering transporting to a comprehensive stroke center. Actually, the entire, well, yeah, the center of the box is VAN positive patients. This is a 5-mile radius for all of the comprehensives, and you may be geographically, as the crow flies, closer to a place, but not as the ambulance drives. So you might end up going to a place that's maybe geographically further away, but it took you less time to get there. And of course, weather, traffic, those are all going to affect your transport times as well. You make the call real time. Hospitals don't have any say in this. It is your decision, just like with trauma centers. Your protocol allows you, if the patient meets the protocol requirements, you are able to transport. You are empowered by the protocol to transport to the appropriate facility. The other questions that comes up is, well, first of all, what if I don't know the last known well time? I already talked about that. But what if I'm maybe chronologically closer to a place, not chronologically, but geographically closer to a place, um, and the family wants me to go there? We're still going to be transporting by transport time. If you get into a situation like that, you can call medical control and say, we're 15 minutes from the closest comprehensive by time travel. We're about 20 minutes to the closest geographical place, and the family would like us to go there. It's closer to their house, et cetera, et cetera. Medical control can always override the protocol. You are still within that 25-minute window, so theoretically you're okay. But you cannot, start making decisions like that without medical control input. Your guidance is to go to the closest place by time travel. So this is the entire exam, and if we're talking about a patient with abnormal arm drift on the Cincinnati, we get into the VAN exam in the middle. If there's anything abnormal, first, let's start with if there's a normal VAN exam. Now you got to reconcile why you did a VAN exam at all, because you shouldn't have done a VAN exam without arm weakness or something like that, and so you should have um, now you have to reconcile why the patient had weakness then, but now doesn't have any weakness on your repeat VAN exam. Probably there won't be that ever happening, but so if you do a VAN and there's absolutely nothing wrong, no vision, no aphasia, no neglect, but they did have weakness originally, you haven't hit any VAN positive findings. The initial re-exam of arm drift, etc., or the palms up 10-second exam is just to get you to the VAN part of this. But if the V and the A and the N are all negative, then you go to the closest comprehensive or primary stroke center. If the patient is VAN positive and you are less than or equal to 25 minutes from a comprehensive, then you go to the comprehensive. If you are greater than 25 minutes, then you transport to the closest primary or comprehensive. The note in the less than or equal to 25 minutes about a primary stroke center with endovascular capabilities, there aren't any of those at this time. That might change. We're considering putting a page in the SMO app that gets updated every time that changes and making you aware of that. So for instance, Resurrection was a comprehensive stroke center. They downgraded to a primary, but I'm told that they're going to regain their comprehensive. So when that happens, they're back in the game for transporting. There may be a primary stroke center that gets endovascular capabilities, in which case, they would enter that sort of orange melon colored box down at the bottom there. All right, so let's go through some scenarios. First couple are kind of the same setup, and then the next three are kind of the same setup, so be easier and recognizable. Patient went to bed at 9 p.m., had no symptoms or complaints. At 8 a.m., the family notices that the patient has not come down for breakfast, and so they go up and they find the patient, and the patient has slurred speech, arm weakness, and facial droop. So all Cincinnati parameters are abnormal. EMS has first patient contact at 10 after the hour. When is the last known well time? In this case, it was 9 p.m. We don't know when the stroke actually happened. It might have happened at 9:01. It might have happened at 7:58 a.m. There's no way of telling. Dr. Phillips says this is a very common situation. Patients go to bed normal, they wake up not normal, and we really don't know when the onset time is, but the last known well time has to be 9 p.m. or 11 hours prior to first patient contact. This patient should get a VAN exam because the patient had arm weakness. Number two, same thing, went to bed at 9 p.m., no symptoms. 8 a.m., find him with the slurred speech, arm weakness, and facial droop. However, a family member says, yeah, I heard grandma or grandpa or mom or dad get up and use the bathroom at about 3 a.m. It was around 3 in the morning. And, they didn't end up on the floor. They weren't calling out for help. There's no crashing sounds. I just heard the toilet flush. So I know they went to the bathroom. So, but they didn't interact with them. They didn't talk to them. They didn't see them. They didn't check for facial droop or notice that they had slurred speech, etc. First patient contact 10 after 8 again. Last known well, it remains 9 p.m. because even though the patient was heard up and about at 3 a.m. around, there was no interaction that tells you that the patient was normal or did not have one of the abnormalities that we talk about. However, it would be a good practice to call medical control and say, we have this 3 a.m. bathroom use, so 5 hours ago the patient was up and about, but we don't know that the patient was normal at that time. They were functional, they weren't flaccid or immobile. However, we don't know that their Cincinnati stroke scale was not abnormal. Again, this patient would still get a VAN exam because of the arm weakness. Scenario number 3. So the next three are pretty much the same. The family left the patient at 10:30 a.m. to go to a school concert. Patient had no symptoms or complaints at 2 p.m. They get home and they find the patient with slurred speech and facial droop, so no arm weakness. First patient contact is 5 minutes later. However, when the neighbor notices the ambulance and the police are at the house to come over and talk to the family, they say, oh yeah, I saw your patient, your family member at noon. They went out, they got the mail from the mailbox, I talked to them, they were fine. Any slurred speech, any facial droop, any apparent weakness? Nope. Functioning perfectly normally for this patient, normal baseline. So last known well in this case, 12 noon, 2 hours, little over 2 hours prior to EMS first patient contact. However, this patient doesn't get a VAN exam because the patient had no arm weakness, had slurred speech, had facial droop, but no arm weakness. So, I mean, you can retest for the palms up 10-second thing, But if you incorporate that in your Cincinnati scale, then you already know that the patient should not get the other three VAN parameters. Number 4, 10:30 a.m., concert, 2 p.m., slurred speech and weakness, first patient contact. Last known well in this case was 10:30 a.m. So this is 3 hours and 35 minutes prior to first patient contact. This patient has expressive aphasia and left gaze preference on the VAN exam. So they are VAN positive. And this patient should go to the closest primary or comprehensive because they are in that 3 to 4 hour thrombolytic window. So if it was 2 hours and 55 minutes, they would have gone to the comprehensive. If it was 4 hours and 5 minutes, they would have gone to the comprehensive. But in that 3 to 4 hour range, we take them to the closest place where they can get an exam, get thrombolysis, and if necessary, transferred to a comprehensive. And then last scenario, 10:30 a.m., 3:15 p.m., arm weakness, slurred speech and arm weakness in this case. First patient contact at 20 minutes after 3. Last known well in this case, 10:30 a.m., nearly 5 hours prior to EMS first patient contact. This patient has the same expressive aphasia and left gaze preference, and so is VAN positive. And this patient then, because they are outside of that 3 to 4 hour window, again goes to the comprehensive if they are less than or equal to 25 minutes transport time. So the key to all this is an accurate last known well time. If you don't have it, then you don't have it. If the patient hasn't been seen for a couple of days and is found in with a stroke-like symptoms, then the last known well time is a couple of days ago. If you can figure out that they talked to somebody and there wasn't slurred speech and the patient said they were up and about and making themselves lunch, then you might reset that last known well clock to that time. So last known well time is the key to all of this. Now, if the patient has a possible stroke, so this I'm going to documentation now. In ImageTrend, you have that visibility filter screen, and you have the possible stroke, yes, no. If the patient has possible stroke, yes, so that's anybody with stroke-like symptoms, then you will have to have a stroke scale. Up till now, I think the stroke scale was an orange 0-point validation rule encouraging you. You do it anyway, but it was just a reminder. In the case of after June 1, it will be a requirement to do a stroke scale. And if the arm weakness or arm drift parameter is any of the abnormal findings, then this VAN exam worksheet will be required. VAN exam doesn't really fit in ImageTrend very well. You can't get into the parameters. There's a possible workaround that I'm working on, but for now we're going to use this. And this is also just a sort of top to bottom re-explanation of what a VAM is. So suspected stroke patient, begin by reassessing the motor function. If they have arm drift or weakness or paralysis or flaccidity, new onset, then you continue with the exam. If they don't, then this is full stop, do not continue. Vision is testing direct and peripheral vision, eye position tracking, and then blurred vision, vision cutoff. Again, it's a yes/no question. There's a place for notes in there if you want to put them. Aphasia, so a simple phrase, you can't teach an old dog new tricks is what we've always used for Cincinnati, but today is a beautiful day, anything. And then identify visually 2 objects, pen, flashlight, iPad, the dog that's running around on the floor or whatever. And then 2 simple commands like, make a fist or stick out your tongue or close your eyes. Slurred speech or baseline aphasia, normal baseline aphasia is not a VAN positive finding, but difficulty forming words or following simple commands or other visual anomalies other than a baseline of slurred speech or aphasia is a positive finding. Otherwise, no, and you continue. And then neglect, forced or disconjugate gaze, um, close their eyes and identify which side a physical sensation or stimuli is on, and then verify eye tracking, particularly if you didn't do it in the vision part of checking side to side beyond the midline, then you would do so now. So abnormal findings are yes, stop because the patient is VAN positive. If not, continue to the next box, and the next box simply says patient had no abnormal findings in the VAN parameters. This patient is VAN negative. You would report this as a abnormal Cincinnati because that's what got you to the VAN exam, but the patient is VAN negative. So that is all I have for today. Please call me or email me or send me a message on Elite if you have any questions. I will do my best to test the validation on the stroke scale parameters and the VAN worksheet. But if you're having any trouble with that, drop me a line and I will be picking up messages every day. So if it happens on Saturday or Sunday, let me know. Please be safe out there, and I will talk to you probably in August. That'll be the next regularly scheduled CE. Bye-bye.